I did this whole thing completely by accident. And we're going to talk about whether that worked out. Hi there, I'm Nicole Wilbur. I'm a writer and story nerd, and welcome back to my channel. Today I am telling you all about my experience working with a developmental editor. Now, I am a writer who is aiming to be traditionally published. So hiring a developmental editor on your own, like prior to even getting an agent or whatever, is not a normal, it's not an unheard of thing, but it's also not a thing that is 100% done versus like self-publishing. They're more likely to be working with an editor. So anyways, this is all from a trad pub point of view, and I am going to walk through the entire timeline in depth, including numbers, timelines, reviews, names, everything about my experience working with a developmental editor. Part 1, deciding to work with an editor, or how did I get this crazy idea in the first place? I've talked about this before, but basically I've written a lot of full-length manuscripts. So what I'm going to be talking about in this video is some kind of criminal, also what I call SMUC for short, because it kind of sort of works if you abbreviate it. Some kind of criminal SMUC is my 5th. And no one else's eyes have ever been on those manuscripts. And I also know that getting feedback was a major turning point in my writing career that basically made me able to write a decent scene when I started posting on Scribophile, when I started getting feedback on short stories and novellas and that kind of thing. So I now feel confident on the scene level, but what about the novel level? And I thought that I wasn't going to be able to level up my novel level without getting outside feedback. So why not just use beta readers? Why actually pay someone to do it? Beta readers are great. I've also had beta readers look at this. They're great, but at this point, I feel like I wanted a professional opinion on my writer. On my writing. I'm not really in the writing world. I'm trying to learn more about the industry. And so it seemed like a good idea to get feedback from someone who really, really knows what they're talking about and who is hired, whose job it is to give me great feedback. I also was really concerned, and this was the biggest part when I started looking, was I became super concerned about how my book could sell and be marketed, because to me it feels like a YA, but the characters are in early university, so they're in their early 20s. And I wanted an opinion on this, because I also know that my book, which is a trilogy theoretically, and the genre, like maybe it's not perfect to be marketed to YA. I don't know. I've been having a crisis. The crisis is kind of still continuing, although and we'll deal with that later sort of level. You know what I mean? So why now? Why do it now? At the time when I started looking, I hadn't even finished my first draft. I have a video I'm going to link below about a self-publishing person who says, yeah, she does multiple rounds of drafts and beta readers, and then she brings it to a developmental editor. To me, this doesn't make any sense because an editor is someone who's going to structurally, a developmental one anyways, is going to structurally like change your book potentially, which is exactly what I was thinking. So and especially for me, like if I'm like, okay, I need to tailor this to the market, maybe I need to change the ages, maybe I need to swap out certain elements, I don't know. Again, that would be structural changes. So in my opinion, you want to do structural changes earlier rather than later. That's just my 2 cents. But I would be interested in hearing what you think about that. And then I also didn't go into it saying, I want an editor. What I really wanted was a deadline, to be completely honest. Like a hard, you get your booty working kind of deadline. And then it ended up being a lot more than that. I did this whole thing completely by accident. And we're going to talk about whether that worked out. Section 2, finding an editor. So I started this whole process at the end of January when I was, let's say, not yet finished my first draft, but in the process of it. I used Reedsy exclusively. I honestly didn't look anywhere else because I'd heard of it. I'd heard good things, and it was so easy to browse for what I wanted. There are a ton of people on Reedsy, and so I had some criteria, some search criteria, which I was able to put in. And the search criteria were basically I don't know if you can put this in the search, but my criteria were professional experience in traditional publishing, because I want to be traditionally published. That means like having worked at a publishing house, ideally, or have been an agent. Experience editing rom-coms, action adventure, and LGBTQ+, or at least one of those. YA and adult experience, I wanted them both, and lots of enthusiastic reviews. So those are my criteria for the people. Oh my, there's like a committee walking. Oh my God, my dad's out there. And they all are just like walking down the road, holding clipboards, looking at a piece of grass. This is so interesting. So basically I had my criteria and I put together a list of editors who seemed like they would have something useful to give me. The fun part being I still didn't know what the heck I wanted. So Reedsy has this process where you submit a brief to up to, I think it's 4 or 5 people. And the brief contains, what you want, a synopsis of your story, and the first 5 pages or so of your manuscript. I think it varies. You can give more, you can give less. So this is the fun part. I had absolutely no idea what I wanted. And my brief, which I am going to put up on the screen, really proved this. Basically what I said was, I don't know what I want, but I'm worried about the market, and maybe I want something else later? ? Like, if I could go back to my earlier self, I'd be like, girl, be more decisive. Figure out what you want, or at least figure out what the options are. But I didn't know. I knew what the options were, but I wasn't sure I wanted like a full edit of the manuscript. I more just wanted an opinion on how I could pitch my book and if I would have to change it. So anyways, I sent out that absolutely beautiful, detailed, decisive brief. And these are the responses that I got. So the first thing that I got was a decline. And they can decline with like a little bit of feedback or whatever. So this person, her message here was basically, I don't know what you want. And the book seems very straightforward. YA fiction with college-age protagonists is increasingly common. So yay. And I was like, oh, it is increasingly common. I mean, I've read like The Ravens. Like I kind of knew that, but I didn't know that. I know there's been a concentration on upper YA. I've heard Michelle Schusterman talk about this beautifully, where it's like, kids need books about kids. And I'm like, yes, they do. And so anyways, they declined it. Let's move on. The next request was canceled. So she actually did respond to me. She said, it sounds like a fun project. She asked a few questions and she said she thought someone else would be kind of much better for what I want to do. And Amy Spalding, I've taken a look at her website, which is great. She has a really good Instagram too, I believe, full of resources. And I think if I ever want to do a sort of query package, because she is so deep in kind of rom-coms, she's written in adult and YA, that I would maybe go to her. But at the time, I had three other editors to deal with. So then we got into the quotes. I got 3 quotes. So quote number 1 was for a $75 query letter review. And I'll put the message up there. Basically, she was saying we'd do it in 1 week. I'd send my query letter. She'd send thoughts. We'd maybe chat about it. Oh, and 10 pages in the manuscript. We'd maybe chat about it, and that would be that. I'm like, okay. $75, I think, is on the lower end for query letter reviews. But I read that, and I was like, all right, that's one. Quote number 2 was a $4,000 editorial assessment of the entire 70-ish thousand word draft, which would be done in about 1 month. Now, she sent me a really nice letter, a really nice message. I'll put it up here. She sent me an FAQ page and asked me a bunch of questions. So the third quote, which came in a little bit later, was for $900 for doing a review, I guess like an edit. She just called it a review of the manuscript, putting in notes, putting together a 2 or 3 page letter, and then, having an hour or so discussion. And basically, she said that would be done in about 2 weeks. So at this point, I was like, I don't have a query letter, and I think it's too early to pay for a critique of a queer letter that I would write. And so I kind of knocked number 1 off the shelf. Then I was looking kind of at number 2 and number 3. Quote number 2, like, I knew that I was not going to be able to spend $4,000 on an editorial assessment. But the communication with this editor, Shersty even, was really, really good. So I'm going to put up another couple of her messages here. So she sent me kind of like the intro saying this is how much it would be for an editorial assessment. And then she sent me another message, which you'll see here, saying, I'm really interested in working on this project. Your writing sample really stuck out to me. And she kind of sent over the offer, as well as the sort of price list and start and end dates. And so I chatted to her, and it turns out that she offers a 50-page reader assessment, which at a much lower price, for less than half of the cost of the editorial assessment, which I thought was potentially a good idea. So I will again put her description of what a 50-page reader assessment is right up here, and the 3 reasons why she suggested doing it. But basically it includes an editorial letter, inline edits like she does for developmental edits for the first 50 pages, and a consultation. She also states right up front that the 50 pages are in industry format, and so I knew right away that would be like 25 to 30 pages of my actual manuscript. And she proposed about 3-week time period for an edit, maybe a little bit more than that. And basically the thoughts around that are that, if you make mistakes in the first 50 pages, you're probably making the same ones in the rest of them. She looks at the full synopsis to understand the story and the plot and give feedback. And the first 50 pages are super important. Statistics show that there's a 91% chance of failure for a story if the first 50 pages don't fulfill their purpose because they set up those subconscious expectations for the reader. Again, really useful. And then it came with a 1-hour consultation. And so at this point, I was really into evaluation. And at this point with my 2, we kind of went into the sample edit stage. So quote number 3, the $900 one, she sent a sample edit of my first page. And Shersty sent a 72-page document of samples of her different kinds of edits. So clips from other people's manuscripts with their names and details and everything removed, with examples of the comments that she gives, snippets from her editorial letters, that kind of thing. And so then I was in the decision-making stage of this all. And so I had the prices, the timelines, the sample edits, the experiences. Obviously, you look through the reviews, everything like that. And I had, from my quote number 3, the $900 one, I knew this information. She replied kind of late to my request. She suggested 2 weeks for an edit of a full 70,000 page manuscript, which 70,000 word, oh my God, pages, 70,000 pages, no, 70,000 word manuscript, which seemed to me like a little bit short, especially to allow her time to just percolate with the story. I mean, of course you could read it, but in terms of offering good insights on plot and stuff, I was like, that seems a bit short. I also felt her sample edit focused on a lot of things that I didn't care about at that stage. They were super fair comments about being confused about certain things, but I just felt like they were nitpicky and kind of besides the point. To be fair, I did use her feedback and used it to revise my manuscript, but I didn't love the sample edit, to be fair. I also didn't recognize any of the authors or books that she'd edited. That's just me. I just didn't. And then she said things like, I didn't fall in love with the main character. It was a fun voice, but I was confused in some places. And so I felt like it might not be the best fit, basically. And especially compared to Shersty. Now, Shersty she edited Mistborn, and I loved Mistborn. I thought Mistborn was brilliant, and it was also a heist, and mine's a heist. She also edited many books for Dan Wells, which are, super recognizable, successful names. And now she doesn't work in traditional publishing too much anymore, but she has her, whole side business. She has a very professional website. It's called Writer Therapy. She has, a whole group of editors. They all provide these services. She's clearly done this many, many times. Suggested a longer time, so more than 3 weeks for only 50 pages with a synopsis and stuff, which to me signaled kind of more care and time taken. Her sample edits on the sample pages, even though it wasn't my book, focused on things that I really cared about, like character development. And she was super enthusiastic about my book. She said, "I'm selective and your voice stood out. I'm so excited to start working with you." All those sort of words that are like, oh, I'm really going to like this. And finally, her reviews said things like, "This was basically a course on writing," which signaled to me that her edits would help me learn skills I could transfer to other books, which was also super important to me. So it was kind of a no-brainer, and I ended up accepting Chersty's offer. So, section 3, timeline, agreement, and price. So this is the edit that I got. For $1,500, I got a 3-week edit of 50 pages with a 1-hour consultation after the edit was finished. So she reviewed 50 pages in standard industry format of the manuscript, a 7 to 12 page synopsis, I think it was 9 or 10 pages in the end, character blurbs, and a series outline, as well as a questionnaire that I put together, or that she sent me that I answered, which she asked for at least 2 weeks before the edit, which outlined kind of my expectations for the collaboration, my goals for the story, where I saw it fitting, what I wanted feedback on, what I thought were the problems, yada, yada, yada. And then we entered stage 4, prepping my manuscript. So the start date, I think, was 4 to 6 weeks out. The start date, I believe, was March 20th or something, and I set a deadline for myself for March 18th, the day that I went to Argentina. I ended up finishing it on like March 19th or something like that. So anyways, I finished up the first draft first, which is a good thing to do. I had 2 to 3 chapters to go, something like that. I knew there were changes I wanted to make, mostly around the character arc and making that a little bit smoother. This continues to be an issue in the manuscript that we talked about, but whatever, it's good. So once I did finish my first draft, I started writing the synopsis, but I wrote the synopsis of what I wanted the story to be, not what it currently was. So, I think usually when I'm like partway through a book, if you look at this is my outlining process video, I'll link it up here. I kind of talk about how I'll write like 15,000 words or whatever, and then kind of figure out the rest of the story. And so I did that, and I got into a stopping point, and I kind of changed the character arc midway through, right into the end. So I had to go back and write it as if I knew what was going on the whole time, like make it more consistent, basically. So I did that through the synopsis. I wrote out everything that I wanted to happen. I figured it out. I figured out the scenes. I had paragraphs for pretty much every scene. There were definitely some changes, some small dialogue alterations, some tweaks, some changing of facts, and 2 to 3, 4 new scenes or scenes that had to be significantly reworked. So in my synopsis, I highlighted those areas in yellow, put bold where I still had questions, and then I got to work making all of the changes. I focused, obviously, on thoroughly editing my first 50 pages because I wanted those to be the best that I could make them. I put everything in industry format at the very beginning so I would know how many pages I needed to have solid, and I made whatever, chapter the 50 pages landed in, I made sure that was like looped into like my 50 pages that are being the best they can be kind of situation. I went through the manuscript in chronological order, matching it to my synopsis. So going through, making all of the changes, and then when I made a change, I got rid of the yellow highlight, basically, or the bold. Once I'd fixed those first 50 pages, I worked on the character list. She wanted, you don't have to send this to her, but she suggested it's a great idea. She likes it to have a little blurb about all of the characters. She sends some great examples of how to do a synopsis and a character list, which I worked off religiously, and they were for, Harry Potter, Pirates of the Caribbean, books and shows and movies that I knew. So that was very helpful. Once I'd kind of fixed those first 50 pages and the character list, I did another pass of those first 50 pages and just made them, again, as good as they could possibly be. I probably did 1 or 2 additional passes, just some line edit level things. Even though this is more structural, again, I wanted it to be clean, and it was. Not all of the changes, interestingly, in the full manuscript were finished, so not all of the yellow highlight in my synopsis was in my manuscript when I sent it to Cherysty. I did send her the full manuscript, so if she looked super closely, like past the 50 pages, she would see some inconsistencies, but all the materials she was going to look at were aligned. They were the right story. And there's that. 5, which is the actual edit. All my work was done at the start date. I sent over all my materials the night before the start date because she asked me to. We also had a slight amendment there at the beginning where I asked to have a market analysis, which was like a little bit more. And then I, finished the rest of the changes in the manuscript. I sent it to a beta reader friend of mine so I could kind of compare the two and sort of, she read the synopsis, she read the actual full manuscript. I thought it would be useful to have someone read the full story and kind of compare it to the 50 pages. So then, 3 weeks later, I got so much feedback. I was and am still a bit overwhelmed by it. So reading all of the feedback that I got takes a good 2 to 3 hours of concentrated sitting down. I've read it all the way through twice, and I will continue going back constantly, I think, as I work on every single draft of this book. So what did I get back? I got back my 50 manuscript pages commented, my synopsis with her comments, an editorial letter that was humongous. Actually, let me check and see. It's a 33-page editorial letter that is literally chock full of stuff. Now, this includes some of the market analysis stuff, but again, not all of it. 33 pages of editorial letter. It's nuts. A separate document with market analysis, 5 writing handouts to support her comments in the documents. These are resources. So she's like, you have this problem. Here's a handout for it. Book recommendations, comparison titles, market numbers. It's nuts. The amount of information that I have. It is insane. I'm actually going to go through and read you the different sections of this letter because it is so long. So she starts with a little letter at the front, just kind of telling me what to expect, what the letter is. She starts off with saying, I absolutely loved working on Smuck and how I was able to re-experience Rome through this book with the clever plot you've created. There's serious potential, some bigger plot issues. I'm going to go over them. I enjoyed the characters and the world, blah, 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 blah. So she does that. Then she gives an overview. So she does an overview of the plot, setting, characters, writing strengths, and areas for improvement. She said I've really mastered showing rather than telling. So just imagine my little writer halo flickering around up there. I have a strong audience integration. Too bad the premise is late emerging. There's logicality issues. The main antagonist is messed up. There's 2 internal goals. The conflict is unfocused. Lena is not proactive. And there's other problems. But she does a really good job of offsetting them. So, okay. After that, there's a section on target audience where she has these blue inserts that basically give definitions and explanations of different industry and writing terms in case you're not familiar with them, and I found them overall very helpful. So she goes through the generally brackets. She gives me some comparison titles, talks about how the market fits into genre conventions, talks about YA versus adult, lists some stuff about new adult, and yada, yada, yada. She also says there's a strong trend where college-age main characters are appearing in YA stories. She makes a suggestion for how to query this. And then she lists a bunch of genre and subgenre conventions. She gives a note on the word count. The next chapter of my editorial letter is all about plot and structure. She defines what a premise is. She defines what a story question is. There's a big sequence basically in my manuscript. It takes too long to get to the story. And she kind of explains why, and it makes so much sense to me the way she laid it out. This full page 12 is amazing. It's something that I knew in theory, and then she points it out, and I'm like, oh my god, duh, of course. And amazingly, what she said literally matches what my beta reader said. Hey, I'm getting bored here, but I never would have understood why until she came in and was like, look, look at this. And I was like, oh, this makes so much sense. It's amazing how many parallels there are also between what she said and what Jackie, my beta reader, said as well. We go through all this stuff about plot. There's examples from other books showing how long it took to the premise, talking about how to do inciting incidents. Then there's a section about story question and main character goal, which need to be a little bit more defined, especially the story question. I'd never heard of story question before, and I love the concept. It's like, oh, I'm going to use it for plotting the entire series now. Then we talked about pacing. And the amazing thing is that it just keeps on going. Page 18 is full of plot revision suggestions. This was another incredibly valuable part of the edit. She gave me options for how to solve the story is starting too late. Literally saying you can do this and this and this, and gave me, a couple options there, which I'm totally running with. They're great. And then we get into the characters and characterization, chapter on page 20, and she goes through each character and talks about them, all the main characters. Then there's a section on dialogue and tone, where she talks about sort of my voice, setting and description. She's mentioned a couple of ways to improve the description, actually, and of the setting. And she has examples, suggests some further reading. So there's 4 craft books that she suggested that I am planning on reading, and then gives sort of a summary of my goals for revision and sort of the things that I should be trying to do in this next round. So much value. I mean, I feel like I absolutely got my money's worth, considering the person who was saying $900 for the entire manuscript was offering like a 2 to 3 page edit letter. This is 10 times that. So I think I absolutely got my money's worth. It was worth the price. I was so excited, so satisfied. The letter is just chock full of stuff. It's so much. That I think it's going to be super useful going on. I know this is going to be one of my go-to editing tools for any book that I write. Remember when she said this? Can you apply that here? I mean, so good. There's a lot, and I'm working on my path forward, but so good. The last thing was the consultation. And the consultation was the part of the collaboration that I loved a little bit less. I think because it was a chat, it was more casual, there was already so much I'd gotten out of the letter that I'm not sure how much was added by the consultation, honestly. I think it was a little bit of a weird shift to go from messaging someone and reading their thoughts to then meeting them in person and having a more casual conversation. I also think I might have gotten a little bit more value out of it if I'd tried to make it into a kind of working session. I sent her an agenda with a bunch of different things, but really I should have been let's nail down the character arc in this meeting. And we kind of did, but not where I felt 150% confident in it. I feel like I have a little bit more work to do. Not that I feel like the editor should do all the work, but you know what I mean? I guess I wasn't quite sure how to use the time in the best possible way. I did my best. It wasn't bad. It wasn't a waste of time. It was useful. I got value out of it, but I didn't absolutely love it. Was completely blown away by how amazing it was, I was for the whole rest of the collaboration. And I'm saying that's literally a me problem, not a her problem. She was excellent. So that is it. We are into the concluding thoughts section of this video. Concluding thoughts. So it was a success in my mind. I got so much feedback. Everything was so worth it. As a result, yes, my book requires a big structural edit, but I anticipated that, and I feel like I know what to do now, so that's very good. I've never been in this step of a book before, so I think it was useful to get that outside opinion to kind of give me some guidance in what to do next. If I was to do it again, I would maybe try to give myself a little bit more time to get materials ready. Not that I was upset with the materials that I sent, but more that I just felt like I had to rush to get them done, and I wasn't 100% sure I would get them done. But it was really nice to have that external deadline to make me push myself to meet the deadline, and I also really liked that because I'm not good at meeting internal deadlines generally. So external deadline was a very good thing. I would maybe, if I was to do it again, check in partway through the edit and just for my own peace of mind, be like, are there any questions? Is anything wrong? I don't think there was, and I think she would have reached out, but I think that would have maybe been good. I've heard other people say that it's totally fine to reach out like that, so maybe. And overall, yeah, I'm just super happy about it, and I'm really excited to move forward. So I would love to hear from you. Have you thought about getting a developmental editor or any kind of editorial assessment or something like that? Have you used one? I'd be interested to hear who you've worked with or what services you use to find them. Any thoughts that you have on this video are more than welcome. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.